Good afternoon and welcome to today's local government education program provided by the University of Illinois Extension. My name is Nancy Wodralgo. I'm a Community and Economic Development Specialist for Illinois Extension. Before introducing our topic and presenter today, I want to let everyone know that at any time you can write your questions into the chat space. And if you have any problems connecting, direct message me and I'll be able to assist you that way. I will monitor that chat and relay questions to the speaker at the end of the presentation. And also note that at the end, you'll receive slides and links to resources and a recording for today's webinar that I'll send you in a follow-up email. Today's webinar is Illinois Office of Broadband Update. We have lots of these, and we are focusing on the new FCC National Broadband Map. This webinar is co-hosted by our new Illinois Broadband Lab, which is a great group of folks and organizations from across the state, including the Illinois Office of Broadband. Presenting today is Shubhika Agarwal. She is visiting coordinator for broadband at the Illinois Broadband Lab. She has a background in urban planning and assists Illinois Digital Equity Grant programs, and as well as Illinois Connected Communities in the Accelerate Illinois Broadband Infrastructure Planning Program. And she helps build capacity around broadband planning by sharing state and federal broadband access and adoption mapping and data resources. And she supports broadband planning efforts by analyzing actual speeds, usage, and satisfaction levels through broadband surveys. Shubhika, it's great to have you on and have you address our group today. And you've just been so wonderful to work with, and we're happy to have you on to give us some insight to this new tool and talk about nuances and so forth. But before I turn it over to you, I want to pass it to Matt Schmidt, Director of the Illinois Office of Broadband, just to give a welcome and some remarks, and then he'll pass it on for our main presentation. So Matt, thank you for always serving as a great partner for outreach on all things broadband for Illinois. Thanks for being here today, and I'll turn it over to you now.
Well, thank you so much, Nancy, and right back at you. We owe you so much at University of Illinois Extension for helping support so much of this kind of work that we do in curating this content online for us. And so just want to shout out, we've got great content regarding our Connect Illinois Broadband Grant Program, Accelerate Illinois, a lot of non-capital work that we do. But today's focus is on mapping, broadband mapping. And for any of you who've ever checked out a broadband map, maybe the Federal Communications Commission or our own Connect Illinois Broadband Map, and you zoom into your location, your house, your business, and you say, you know what, the service that I experience or am offered doesn't necessarily jive with what the map suggests. Well, now is your opportunity to leverage a new Federal Communications Commission map. Check that out and register feedback on what you're experiencing. Taking a step back, the importance of broadband mapping has never been greater because of new federal and state funding that's going to help us achieve universal broadband across the state. And so what we're asking communities across Illinois, anchor institutions, local governments, individuals in their homes and businesses to take a look at the mapping and help us get as much feedback as we possibly can to perfect not only our state broadband maps, but also the federal maps. And why? Because it's going to help us target resources as best as we can to make sure every last home, business, anchor institution is served with the broadband that they need in the year 2022 and beyond, but also help us drive up our formula funding that we get from the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment Program. Hundreds of millions of dollars are on the line for a state like Illinois. And if we're able to perfect the mapping and give the best data possible to the Federal Communications Commission, we'll be able to target resources smart and also optimize, maximize the amount of federal funding that we get to achieve our goals. And so with that said, I'm really thrilled to pass the mic to Shubhika, who knows so much about this opportunity, so much about our mapping. And with that said, Shubhika, take it away.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you so much for setting the stage. And let's get started. So the new FCC maps that we've all been waiting for a while are now out. And with that, also the different challenge processes to ensure that the maps really show the most accurate information out there. So a historic opportunity for us to make huge strides in closing the digital divide here in Illinois and across the country with the new maps. So this is where we'll need your help as well. So in today's webinar, we're going to walk through the steps of how Illinois residents and different organizations across the state can really help with this process. Again, as Matt mentioned, why is this needed now? Because the maps are out and we want them to be as accurate as possible, because they're going to drive the federal funding that's coming into states pretty much in June 2023. And then how can you help? So it's as easy as going to the FCC's website, checking out the National Broadband Map, and then if there are errors in what's shown on there, submitting a challenge. So we'll get into the details of all of these different challenge processes that are out there in today's presentation. It's basically in the following order. Firstly, talk about the FCC fabric and the availability maps, because just setting the stage with what the two mean and how they work together. Then there's the broadband mapping and funding allocation timeline, just to give a sense of how it all started and where we see it going with the timeline. The need to participate again, why is this important now? The different challenge processes, to like sum it up, there's the fixed availability challenge process and the fabric or location challenge process. And each of these can either be done by individual consumers or by organizations at a broader scale with bulk challenge processes. And then there's also the FCC mobile service coverage challenge process. And finally, we'll be sharing updates on what the Illinois Office of Broadband has been doing with respect to the bulk challenges, and later on take any questions that we have. So starting with the FCC fabric and the availability map, the broadband serviceable locations fabric, which is usually referred to as the fabric, it is essentially the a layer of all the locations in the United States and territories where fixed broadband internet access service has been or could be installed. And this is what essentially makes up the fabric. And each point on this fabric is referred to as a broadband serviceable location. The distinction, so the ones that are not referred to as broadband serviceable locations are the ones that would actually subscribe to enterprise or commercial grade service over the mass market broadband service is available. The next one, the FCC National Broadband Map, or also referred to as the availability map. So this is again with the objective to make sure that high-speed internet is provided to all across the country. And so the first step being knowing where service is and is not available. So that is what is the purpose of the availability map, helping us know areas and locations specifically where there is service and where there isn't. So it is an overlay of the internet plans offered by various providers onto the fabric layer that we previously discussed. So consumers on the availability map, they can view the list of providers that have reported different internet services available at the selected location, the type of services, so whether that's fiber, cable, DSL, satellite, or fixed wireless, the maximum advertised download and upload speeds. So that's pretty much all the information on there. This was made public on 18th of November, and the challenge process is right now open until January 13th, 2023. So a pretty short window there. And again, that is what makes it a little time sensitive as well. Now, moving on to the timeline. So the FCC fabric was initially opened up in June, made available to providers for submitting the first round of availability data through the BDC, which is the broadband data collection platform that was set up by the FCC. In September, they opened the first round of FCC bulk fabric challenge processes for state and tribal governments. And so we were able to get access to the fabric and then just make sure that it is accurate based on the different data sets that we have at the state level. On November 18th, as I mentioned, that is when the new FCC availability maps came out. And so we are now open with the individual and bulk availability challenge processes that are supposed to be ending on the 13th of January, 2023. By end of June 2023, that is when NTIA anticipates allocating the BEAD funding based on the FCC maps. So again, it's these maps that's going to affect funding. So we want to make sure it's as accurate as possible so that, yeah, funding is fairly distributed among states in the country. And then that's in late 2023 and early 2024. That is when states will begin with their sub-grant programs with the BEAD funding that they receive. That's the timeline. Cannot stress it more, the need to participate. Firstly, making sure that on this location to location granular maps that's available, making sure that all the addresses and the availability information on there is accurate. And the unserved areas that are going to be identified through these maps are going to drive the BEAD funding that's going to come down to states in June next year. Starting out with the availability challenge process. So we'll firstly discuss how individual consumers can actually do this, and also organizations that would like to help individuals submit a challenge can do that, because we understand that we really want to reach out to those areas which have poor broadband services, and because the entire process is set up online. So we definitely want to build in those collaborations as well, so that people who do not have good access to broadband actually have the resources through local schools and libraries and other organizations to just engage in the process and have the resources they need to engage in the challenge process. So when would a consumer need to file an availability challenge? So the FCC has laid down 9 different categories of, when they would be accepting an availability challenge. And to make it easier, we've subcategorized it into 3. So you would need to report a challenge if the reported service or speed that has been reflected on the map is not available for purchase at that location, or if the fixed wireless or satellite signal that is reflected again to be available is not available at that particular location. And again, it has its subcategories there. So provider does not offer that technology, or they do not offer the speeds that have been reported, or the fixed wireless or satellite signal is not available at the address, or the subscribed speed is not achievable. So those are the 4 that would fall into this subcategory. Then the second one is denied service or demanded connection charges that exceed the standard installation charges. So again, this is divided into 3. The provider might have denied the request for service. They might have requested for more than what's the standard installation fee, or the service requires some new kind of equipment to actually utilize the service. And lastly, fail to schedule or perform installation within 10 days of request. So again, that's the 2 categories: schedule or install the service. One thing to note here is that challenges to the map should be based on requests or information collected prior, that is collected prior to June 30, 2022, cannot be considered, because all of these maps represent availability data as of June 30th, 2022. So once you have a sense of whether you want to participate in the challenge process and would you qualify for submitting a challenge, these are the steps that you would have to follow. Firstly, visit the FCC broadband map. It's linked right here. Then it just shows up with a screen where you can type in your address. When you do that, it takes you to your particular address, and you get a list of providers that provide various different technologies and speeds at your location. If that information is correct to the best of your knowledge, then you don't have to do anything, and the information for your location is good. But if you see any inaccuracies there, that is when you will have to submit an availability challenge. On the right here is a screenshot of what that pop-up of the availability challenge would look like. So you would select the provider, so you can make individual challenges for the provider that you think has, does not provide service at your location. And again, we want to stress on the word availability. So if they offer it, that is considered available, and hence your challenge wouldn't stand if they do provide service in that area. So after you do select the provider, you would select one of these 2 options. So send my challenge to the selected provider, which will initiate the challenge against that provider, Or the second one could be that you're just giving feedback about the information and not really filing a challenge. So that's just some crowdsourced information that the FCC is going to have so that they can refer to it at a future time, just to make sure that these are certain areas where they should be more accurate with their data collection. Then the form really asks you to enter your contact information. So this is going to include the name and email address, and the phone number is optional. So again, making sure that people who are participating have access to email addresses, and if that is an issue in certain areas, again, schools and libraries, institutions like these can be really helpful in, setting that up for people so that they can easily participate in the challenge process. The next one is selecting the reason for the challenge. So that's going to be out of the 9 that we had previously highlighted. The next portion would require you to describe the information, what part of it is incorrect, and then support it with documentation. So again, this part is important, the evidence that you provide to support your claim for the challenge. So this could include details of a request for service or attempted request, include the date, method, and content of the request, and also the response from the provider. This could be screenshots or emails, and just showing that there's no availability at the location that's being disputed. The next part requires you to electronically certify your submission and make a submission. So now there's like a short recording on how this entire thing works online. So we'll try and look at that real quick. And Nancy, are we seeing the browser screen, or are we still seeing
the FCC has a new...
You're going to want to stop sharing first,
Okay.
and then go ahead and share the browser. And the sound sounds good.
The FCC has a new map showing where internet service is and is not available across the country. We need your help to ensure the information on the map about the internet services available to your home or small business is accurate. On your mobile device, go to broadbandmap.fcc.gov. Type your address in the search bar and select the best match from the list that displays. Your location will appear as a point on the map, along with information about internet services offered at the location below the map. Red locations indicate that no internet services are reported for that location. If one of the services listed is not actually offered to the selected location, you can select the Availability Challenge link. This will bring up a form where you can first select the provider to challenge. Scroll down and complete the form, selecting the reason for your challenge from the drop-down list. Options include the reported service is not available, or the provider is requesting more than a standard installation fee to get you connected. You can upload files like emails or screenshots to support your challenge, or you can write a description of your experience in the form. Be sure to check the certification box at the bottom of the form and then select Submit to submit your challenge. With your help, the map will be more accurate, and an accurate map is an important tool for expanding internet services to all Americans. Broadbandmap.fcc.gov.
So yeah, I think that was like a short little video that I think helps bring all of this to life and just makes better sense. So I hope that is helpful. Moving back to the presentation. And Nancy, are we seeing the slides?
Perfect.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So yeah, that's about the availability challenge by individual consumers, the process and how to do it. And then the next part, what to really expect after filing an availability challenge. So the FCC is going to make an initial review just to make sure that it's not a complaint about the quality of service or any billing issues, then ensure that, the right reason selected and there is sufficient evidence to back, the challenge that's been made. After they've done the initial review, the consumer is going to receive an email notification from FCC, which is going to notify that, they have shared this information with the provider. A unique ID for the challenge will be shared, and all the other challenge information that was submitted by the consumer. Then the provider is going to have 60 days to review and respond. So in this case, if they either concede or fail to rebut, in that case, this map is then not going to show access by that provider on the National Broadband Map. But if they decide on rebutting it, that is when the consumer is going to hear from the provider to resolve the challenge. There's going to be a 60-day period to do that. And if they are not able to reach a conclusion, then it is the FCC who's going to make the final decision. And when they've done that, the consumer is again going to receive an email, or they can simply go back to the National Broadband Map, look up their location, and just find, what has happened to their challenge. So as cumbersome as that might seem, what we really want to stress on is it's going to be a relatively easy process. We don't know what that interaction with ISPs might look like right now, but we definitely encourage people across the state to engage in this, because, with all the issues that you've had across, with broadband during this time, this is the first opportunity where you get to, formally register a complaint with the FCC and share your concerns. So definitely take up the opportunity and make those interactions with ISPs much more meaningful. And hopefully that helps, also make the maps more accurate, but also get better service to your particular address and to your communities and, all parts in the state. So definitely encouraging individuals to do that. The next part is the FCC fabric or location challenge process. So this is again for individuals and organizations, helping them out. When would one have to submit a fabric or location challenge? So this is when you type in your address in the National Broadband Map and encounter one of the 4 following things. That is when you might have to submit a fabric or location challenge. So firstly, the next screen shows that there's no location data available for the address that you've typed in, meaning that the location is missing on the fabric. The second one, the address shows up as a gray point, meaning that it might have been incorrectly identified to subscribe to enterprise or commercial grade service over the mass market service. So if that's wrong, then also you can submit a fabric challenge under the category of misidentified location. The third one is the corresponding unit counter building type is incorrect. So if that's the case, then you'll be filing an incorrect information fabric challenge. And lastly, if the address shows up on a wrong location on the map itself, that is when you would be submitting a fabric challenge under the category incorrect placement on the map. So these are the 4 instances when one might have to submit a fabric or location challenge. And how to go about this? So again, the same process, visiting the same map. When you enter your address, if you have, you encountered any of the 4 scenarios there, that is when you have to submit this challenge. So if there was some incorrect information, again, there's a screenshot of what that pop-up is going to look like. You enter your address details and contact details. This is again going to be your name, email address, and phone number, which is optional. Select the challenge type, describe the inaccuracy that you are reporting, and you can support it with screenshots, photos, descriptions, or if it's just the address, maybe a Google Maps screenshot that, this address exists and the details. Electronically certify and submit. So yeah, and if the location's missing on the right here, this is a screenshot of just scrolling through the map, finding the accurate location for your address, clicking on that and selecting on challenge location, and then following the process that is mentioned to the left. Also, one suggestion that we make here is in the description, you may want to include information about the kind of internet access that you already have at this location, because the map does not have that information at this point. So just submitting that beforehand might be good and might also help FCC understand whether this would fall in the unserved or underserved category at this point. The next one, the FCC Mobile Service Coverage Challenge processes. So again, this is for individual consumers as well as organizations would like to do it. But this part does not really affect the BEAD allocations. So we don't want to like stress a lot on this, but this is also open for challenge. And we just want to like briefly talk about this. So there are again 5 categories. And for this, you will essentially have to download the FCC speed test app, which is going to record the speed and directly share it with the FCC to then share it with the provider, and then they can respond to it. So there's also an instructions web page on how to go about the challenge process. Again, one important thing to note here is that FCC requires that these speed tests be done outside the home. So it's either supposed to be outside or in a moving vehicle. So if that is something that a consumer is interested in, they could go through this process, and there are resources here on how to download the app and how to exactly go about the mobile service coverage challenge process. Moving on to the bulk availability and fabric challenge processes. So this is for any of the organizations who want to make these challenges for a larger audience and residents that they represent. To participate in the bulk challenge process, these are the following steps that organizations can go through. So they'll firstly have to register with the FCC broadband data collection platform. And there is a link here to the steps. It's essentially having a FCC registration number, creating a login on the broadband data collection platform, and then there's a license agreement to be signed. And then you finally get access to the fabric and also can submit bulk challenges through that platform. The next step would be to identify local address data sets if you're interested in the fabric challenge, or identifying the different infrastructure or consumer surveys that you can use for the bulk availability challenge. Third, developing a strategy for validating the fabric data or availability data in your specific region. And also ensuring that you have the right kind of evidence to support each of these challenges. Fourth, aligning your data with specifications. So for each of these, there is a specific format with how FCC requires these submissions to be made. And both of these are linked down here. So making sure that all of that is in place, because if it's not, they'll not let you submit that into the system. And again, we are here to help you with any of this. So if you're interested and there are questions when you go about this process, certainly reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you out. And after you have all of that ready, again, this requires that you certify the submission and then make the challenge. Yeah, so a little bit information just to give you a sense of the attributes in the FCC fabric when you're considering local data sets that you might want to use to cross-reference some of this information with. So the FCC fabric has location ID, which is specific to each location, and that is generated by their system. Then there's the geographic coordinates, so the latitude and longitude, and each of this is the point within the building footprint. Then there's the address, which includes the primary address, state, city, zip code, and the zip code suffix. The unit count. So in case of multiple unit dwelling buildings, those are represented as 1 broadband serviceable locations in the fabric. So it's attributed with the number of units in that building separately. So if there are 12 units, there's just 1 point, but the unit count field lets us know that there are 12 dwelling units at that particular address. So having that kind of information as well. And based on their understanding of the kind of internet service that particular location would subscribe to, it's categorized as a BSL or a non-BSL. Then there's also information on the building type, so residential, commercial, or both, and then the county and census block it falls into. So some of this information, having the coordinates, the address, the unit count, and the building code in the data that you're using can be really helpful to make those comparisons. And the next part of the slide talks about the types of fabric challenges. So there's missing broadband serviceable location, incorrect address, incorrect unit count, incorrect location building type. The location is not within the footprint of the building, or the location is not broadband serviceable, or if you want to add a supplemental address to the particular location. And again, with the Illinois Office of Broadband, the focus has been mainly on identifying the locations that have been missing from the fabric. And towards the end, I'll share more about what we've done with the fabric challenge process so far. Moving on, talking about the fixed availability challenge. So there are 3 methodologies that the FCC has laid out for the bulk fixed availability challenge. Firstly, the knowledge of infrastructure. So this information could be based on the knowledge or observation of where network facilities and plants exist. So this could be through on-ground examination of infrastructure, through building permits, or through right-of-ways. So a lot of this information could be kind of accessible at the county level. So again, counties being a good starting point to get involved with this. Then there's the information collected from individual consumers. So if your county or specific region has been active in collecting this kind of data about availability from consumers, that's also something that you can use for the challenge process. And lastly, the good part is that they've kind of left it open-ended with this other kind of methodology where it's not based on the first 2 options and the contact details. So yeah, it's just it should make sense. It's not one of the 2. It could be a combination or something different, but then you have to have a good backing for the method that's being used for the challenge, and you'll have to provide your contact details and a description of the method if you're making this kind of a challenge. And for the bulk availability challenge, the kind of evidence that's acceptable is, again, you have to include your methodology, the basis for determining the underlying challenge, and any communication with the providers. And you have to have evidence for each of the individual, challenges that are being included in the bulk challenge process. There's a short 20-minute video on how to submit a bulk fixed availability challenge by the FCC on YouTube. So I've linked it down here. And that's mostly helpful towards the end of it when you have most of the data. And it's just on how to make that submission using the broadband data collection platform. So again, we encourage you to try and go through these steps and participate in the bulk challenge process. But if you're unable to do so, definitely reach out to us with the different data sets that I mentioned earlier. If you have that sort of information that can be helpful for the state, and we'd be happy to go through that information and file a bulk challenge on behalf of your region or county. And the other thing that I want to emphasize here is there's a webinar today at 3 p.m. by the FCC, which is going to discuss more about the bulk fixed availability challenge. There's a link here. We can also share that in the chat later on. So attending that would be good if you see yourself interested in wanting to participate in the bulk availability challenge moving forward. Ending with the Illinois Office of Broadband's participation in these challenge processes so far. So with the bulk fabric challenge process, as of November 13th, we've submitted nearly 80,000 missing broadband serviceable location challenges across the state through the bulk availability challenge. And we use the Illinois Next Generation 911 data set as our baseline for making this challenge. These have been submitted, and we're still pending FCC's review and approval on these. The fabric challenge is still open, and the submissions, anything that we submit at this point is essentially going to show up in the future revisions of the fabric. So there's no deadline to this, and we constantly want to keep, participating and contributing to this so that we can help have the maps more accurate as we go with like future iterations. And with the bulk availability challenge, we're still strategizing how to use some of the data that we collect as part of our state broadband maps and use that as a good starting point to, prepare for a bulk availability challenge. So concluding with, it's really important. We have a short timeline. The deadline's 13th January 2023 for submitting these challenges. So spread the word, reach out to areas that have limited broadband options, if you, because they could potentially be unserved. And then the areas that depend solely on fixed wireless or satellite services, again, because there is a probability of overstating access in those areas. So focusing on some of those, including libraries and schools, so that residents have the resources they need to successfully, participate in the challenge process. And the deadline is 13 January 2023. So we want to make sure that as many people participate in this is good. If you have any questions, again, please reach out to the Illinois Office of Broadband at broadband@illinois.gov. And that concludes the presentation. Happy to take questions at this point now.
Thank you, Shubhika. We've got a very active chat right now. I want to kick us off with some questions that came in at the earliest, and also sort of mention that, we do have Matt on the line for some of these questions, and he could interject as well. So let's go ahead and get started. The first question that came in is, are these exclusively polygon maps versus the census tract maps? And can you just speak to what those sort of scopes are?
Sure. So with this map, it's a point-based map is what I'd say. So you can essentially get to a specific address in the state, in the county. So get to your specific address, look up the providers on there, and then make that challenge. So it's as granular as it can get.
Thank you. So the next question that I received is a two-part question. Is there a challenge for excessive data charges where work from home situations can require gigabytes of data per month? And the second part of this question is about satellite providers having high data overage charges. In that case, would there be a cost threshold with the FCC to where that extra data cost qualifies for an availability or access challenge?
I would say that, this is more of an availability challenge. So you can certainly provide information about affordability and all of that as, just if you want to share that with the FCC, but that wouldn't really qualify for an availability challenge. But it's good to share that information and just, put it out there so that the FCC has it as crowdsourced data.
Thank you for clarifying that. It's good to know that, you don't have to necessarily follow a certain very strict rule when knowing or not if you can make a challenge. Can local governments get an aggregate count of the number of challenges submitted in their area? So for example, could a county government get that number of challenges that were submitted from their county, or could a municipal government be informed of that number?
So what I would say for this is, if the state is making a challenge for the county, we can certainly share that information. But I think we're working out something with the FCC if they can provide this kind of data to us on real-time basis. So just share how many challenges they've been getting from the state, from different parts of the state, if that's possible. So we're working that out. We don't have a solid answer to that yet, but hopefully that is a possibility. And Matt, if you want to add to that, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, Shubhika, you're doing a great job with the questions here, and these truly are great questions. I would just add that if folks feel like, hey, this is a tight timeline, or we're building the airplane where we're flying it, that's true for states around the country. We received these deadlines in basically early November, had the holiday weekend, and we wanted to come out of that and build some momentum for December and going into January. There's a distinct possibility that the January 13th deadline could be extended. There's also, I think, the reality that Illinois has been collecting broadband mapping data for a couple of years now, and broadband mapping is a competitive advantage of ours. And so when you look at the opportunity that we have here, we absolutely want to perfect the FCC's map. But we do feel like we're in a really good position to provide good feedback to the FCC from the state, and then also to continue to refine our state map. And we'll definitely use our state map to help guide investment moving forward. And so what we're trying to do is leverage this opportunity that the FCC has created to give as much feedback and most accurate feedback as possible, engage stakeholders, communities, Illinoisans across the state. But we also recognize that the tight timeline, the holidays, the fact that there's a lot of guidance that we're waiting from FCC makes for a less than ideal, environment for perfecting this. That being said, it's a great opportunity for us to make our maps, the FCC's maps, better, optimize the resources that come into the state for investing in broadband. And so I think the point is, there are deadlines out there. We're not going to stop asking folks to provide data. The FCC is not going to stop asking folks to provide data. And we want to continue to make the maps as high quality as possible. And so I think if folks do feel rushed, or they feel like this is not the best time of the year for doing this, we're with you. But we want to lean into this opportunity with all we've got. And there's going to be more guidance coming from FCC. There's going to be more guidance coming from our office. And just to head off a question, if you've participated in one of our programs in the past, for instance, Accelerate Illinois, we'll be reaching out to you with specific guidance on how you can leverage that experience to provide feedback and continue to engage your community. And so we really want to build off of that momentum that we've created in Illinois to facilitate consumer participation and also bulk challenges. I think the point is, we're still putting some of these pieces together, and we wanted to connect with you all today to raise this on your radar and let you know we're paying really close attention to this. And we want to start a conversation with you over the next several weeks to make sure that folks around the state feel empowered to participate. So I went on a little monologue there. I apologize for that, but Shubhika, you're doing a great job, and I'll step back here.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
So the next question we have here is, we have a participant saying that it looks like the only way to get availability data for a location is to enter the address manually. So it's kind of just a functionality question. Can you click on the map, or what are the different ways that you can kind of look at your different areas or specific locations?
Sure. So I think if it's a consumer that's wanting to do it and, just challenge the availability at their location, that's the easiest way. Type in your address and it directly takes you there. So that's the way to do it. But if there's, a county professional or somebody who's working with a larger region wanting to do this, then you can certainly go to the map. You can zoom in, zoom out, also filter between different technologies that are being offered. So that really shows how percentages of served and unserved change based on the different, technology types and speeds that are selected. And you can scroll through, look at different addresses. You can also see locations that have already filed a specific challenge. So I can actually share my screen and show that if that's, of interest.
Sure. And this makes me want to kind of jump down the list a little bit to another question that was posed kind of along these lines. Imagine that there is a professional that's they have another set of collected information about speeds at addresses. So they have a list of addresses in their county, they've got the speeds, or they know where they can get that information and can, sort of contact that person to get that information if they've had somebody collect that information for them. And so, you know, if you, for example, had a list of addresses and speeds for a county that you had collected just through like a primary data collection survey or speed test, how would you use the tool to just most efficiently have an organized way to communicate those challenge details?
Sure. So I will basically answer that in like two parts. So firstly, unfortunately, speed tests are not considered as, valid evidence for the fixed availability challenge. But we know that, that information has been collected, a lot of work going on, communities doing that, states doing that. So that can actually be a good resource to try and understand those areas where you really see a disconnect between speeds that are offered and what people are receiving, and really targeting on those areas for the fixed availability, like reaching out to those populations and then just trying to make sure that you can get them under one of the categories, the 9 reasons for why they can file an availability challenge, get the evidence that is acceptable. So like communication with providers, maybe going to their website and just looking up your address and finding that they do not provide service there. So that would be the way to go. We directly cannot be using speed tests for the fixed availability challenge at this point based on FCC guidelines.
Okay. Let's look at the next set of questions here. I don't know if Matt, you wanted to chime in or.
Yeah, Nancy, as
Okay.
you're looking at other questions, I would just, emphasize what Shubhika said, that the speed test data, even though it's not accepted as evidence by FCC, it really helps communities and the Office of Broadband and others kind of identify areas where data points are telling us different things. And those are areas where, as Shubhika mentioned, further examination or emphasis can really help reveal a higher number of unserved locations than what the FCC map may reveal. And so all of that past work on speed tests or collecting data at the local level, really useful. Some of it can be used as evidence, but a lot of it's going to help us identify where to prioritize future efforts and inquiry.
Thank you. Another participant asks, why is a location labeled as served when there is only access to satellite internet service? And please note that satellite internet service doesn't meet the definition of served for purposes of BEAD. That's the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Funding Program.
Sure. So I think the map right now includes satellite as well. And so I think I'll go ahead and share my screen to just get a little more into details of this. So I'm just randomly going to type in address, whatever comes up first. So you type in an address, this is what it looks like. It's going to take you to that particular address. You can zoom in. You can also look at other addresses, as I mentioned earlier, just like, and after a point, if you scroll out, it just turns into these different hexagons. So there's a particular zoom level where you see the address level information. And on here, there's this little settings sort of gear, which you select, and you can select the kind of technology that you're looking at and also the speeds. So right now, because it's got any technology, so if that particular address is served even by satellite, by 25 by 3, it's going to show up as served. But now if I select, maybe let's say fiber, for example, that is when, the map really changes based on the technology that I've selected. And because this address right here does not have any provider that's, providing fiber service, that is when it's going to show as not served. And when you zoom out, all of these colors on the map for the hexagons have also changed based on the technology that I have chosen. So that is the reason why it's showing up that way. Again, for the BEAD allocation, they're not going to consider satellite access as served. So that's you're covered there. But for the map purposes, because initially it says any technology, so even if that location is served by satellite, it shows up as served for the map.
Thank you. Another great question. Is there a public service announcement that could be pre-made or that is pre-made that we could share on social media discussing this with the hyperlink to the broadband map? Shubhika, I don't know if you've seen anything, but that's a great idea. And what do you have to say about that?
Sure, we are certainly working on some of those, outreach materials that we can put out there that can be helpful for counties and other organizations working on outreach. So we'll have that pretty soon. Again, the bi-weekly newsletter that we have is like a good place to keep updated on, the resources that we're putting out there. It's probably going to be available on our website as well. So yeah. We will have that pretty soon.
Good reminder to include the link to that biweekly newsletter when we send that out. And of course, feel free to enter that in the chat. I know we have some colleagues on the line if someone wants to put that in as well. And we can share that as well when we send out materials. The current FCC definition of broadband is a 25 megabytes per second download. Can we clarify that and whether this map reflects this or how the map may go above and beyond this sole definition? The reason is because the NTIA BEAD definition is separate from the purpose of the FCC broadband map, and NTIA may use a subset of the FCC broadband data for their definition. So Shubhika, can you address this in regards to more broadly how funding programs may rely either inclusively or exclusively on broadband FCC broadband data, and how this map may play a role in those determinations?
Sure. So the unserved is yes, 25/3, and the technologies that they're considering are all like the fixed ones, and satellite is not included. And underserved is the 100/20 Mbps. So that's the one that's going to be used for funding purposes. The map also includes satellite, but yeah, as I mentioned, that's not going to be considered as served for the funding purposes if it only has satellite access.
Okay, I just wanted to let folks know too, there was a question about the slides being available. And of course, we'll make those available in the follow-up email, but I also pasted a link where if you click that link, you can download Shubhika's slides. And so that's pasted in the chat box as well, if you kind of scroll down to the bottom. To add another dimension to this speed threshold question, can you talk about how latency is incorporated into the FCC map data and could be talked about within the challenge process details and how fluid that may be?
I am not entirely sure about this. Matt, do you have information that you'd like to share?
I think this is something that we'll have to get some additional guidance to provide for folks. But I think the point is, the NTIA is most interested in if you've got, wireline connectivity that allows for 25/3 or better service, or licensed spectrum connectivity that does the same. And so if latency is an issue, definitely register a challenge. If the challenge form is not configured to reflect your feedback, reflect your feedback anyways, because I think it's really important for the FCC to know that Illinoisans are checking out this mapping resource, and that if they have concerns with what the map says versus what Illinoisans are either experiencing or have been offered, that it's registered. And as Shubhika mentioned earlier, we do hope that we're able to get some feedback from FCC on the number and type of challenges that have been submitted to FCC by consumers, so that we get a better understanding of, the level of participation and what kind of themes this process has revealed. And so as we get more information, we'll definitely share that. But I would just emphasize again, if you go into that map, in the challenge form and the questions that are being asked don't necessarily fit in with what you'd like to say it anyways, because we want you to make your voice heard.
Thank you. Another great community outreach question. How do people without internet submit a challenge? Do public challenge dates at local libraries or other public locations make sense?
Yes, that is absolutely what we're encouraging, and we'll have like specific materials out there for libraries and schools as well, so that they are prepared to help, their residents actually successfully enter challenges. So that definitely is a recommendation, and we want to make those ties really stronger, because we definitely want to reach out to those areas that do not have access to good broadband, and they certainly would need, help from these local community anchor institutions to get to the map and successfully file their challenges. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you. We have
And-
yep, go ahead.
Oh, Nancy, if I could add to that, just as we're running out of time, I think, as folks kind of internalize this opportunity and think of what can I do next, if you're a consumer and you want to register feedback, definitely participate in that consumer process and spread the word among your family and friends and others, because that's the way that Illinois is really going to take advantage of this opportunity, is word getting around. And as Shubhika mentioned, we're putting together materials and an approach so that we're able to engage stakeholders and community organizations and others so that they can help us spread the word and help members in the community take advantage of this program. If you're a local government or a community organization and you've been tuned in on this issue for a while, or it's an important issue and you want to get plugged in now, think about where these challenges, when I say challenges, the lack of service or availability have been a problem in your community or for those residents that you serve, and try to catalog, all right, where are the areas in my jurisdiction that we should be focusing in on? We're going to provide more feedback and guidance on how you can submit and collect a bulk challenge. But the point is, that's a really good use of time for local governments or community organizations taking a view of your respective community's footprint. Where are the problem areas where you just haven't seen the level of service meet perhaps what maps have told us in the past? Really good use of time right now is guidance is being developed.
Wonderful. And we have a few more questions that kind of they speak to something that I even might want to address. Is there's some communities and counties on the line that have participated in past programs where the speed test information was collected. And of course, Shubhika from the Illinois Broadband Lab, Illinois Extension, if we worked with you on those surveys, definitely reach out to us, and we'll work with you to see how to assist in you collating that information properly for this purpose. Another question that is on marketing and outreach materials that could generate more data entries. Which audiences or consumers should we attempt to reach?
I think the key here is that we're focusing on unserved areas in your community. And so in particular, areas where the FCC map says one thing in our experience or data says another. If the FCC maps, we're thinking at the bulk level here, if you're looking at your community and the FCC already marks an area as unserved, okay, we're covered. That's good, because that's what we're trying to do, is make sure every last unserved area in the state is reflected in the FCC's map. It's going to help us target resources. It's going to drive up our federal BEAD appropriation. But that being said, you can target communities that have fallen through the cracks, that might not have access to the internet, that might not necessarily see these messages, and help reach them in ways that you've found success in the past. And that's why it's really important for this to be an all hands on deck kind of approach, where it's not the State Office of Broadband or the university's broadband lab trying to reach everybody all at once, but rather we have a nuanced and multi kind of modal approach for reaching Illinoisans and identifying those areas where folks have fallen through the cracks, where the map might say one thing and the reality is another. And again, more guidance will be coming from our office, from the FCC, but we really want to empower local approaches that have worked in the past. Think, the census, or you think about, public health, or you think about other ways of reaching communities. Those sorts of approaches could be successful for this as well.
And I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. We also have passed the 1 o'clock hour, but I want to give Matt and Shubhika the opportunity to share any lasting takeaways with this group. And then, of course, I'll mention a few items and we'll close up.
Take it away, Shubhika.
I just want to say, yeah, a lot of information that we've shared here today. We just want to make it as easy as possible for individual consumers to participate in this, make them have the resources that they need to, actively participate and successfully file a challenge. And we are, available. We've shared our email address. So any questions that you have, if you want to collaborate more extensively with us, definitely reach out. And as we've been mentioning, there's going to be more materials out there. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of activity around this in the next few weeks. We hardly have a month and a half to make this happen. So yeah, need all of your support, and we're always there to answer questions or just help with specific, challenges, if at all that's needed as well. So yeah, thank you.
And Nancy, for my part, I'm just putting our broadband@illinois.gov email address in the chat. Just again, folks, take advantage of the opportunity to reach out. If you've got any ideas, we want to hear them. I think a collaborative effort is going to help us get the most out of this opportunity. And again, we're not taking any deadline as final. We're going to really lean into this and try to engage Illinoisans across the state, not just for the federal maps, but for our own maps moving forward.
That's wonderful. And Shubhika, if you would also like to share your email, I know I've got a few questions, some direct questions here regarding needing to just sort of get a little bit more guidance. So that would be great if you can add yours as well. Thank you so much. Hey, thanks for the presentation today. Thank you to everybody for participating. Be sure to note that we have a repeat session of this tomorrow at noon as well. So perhaps you're thinking you want to come back on for that Q&A. Maybe from now until then you get another question that pops in your mind. You want to come back on and do some more discussion. You're welcome to join us again tomorrow, or if you want to pass on the information to others. So I'll include the registration link in that follow-up email today when I email registrants the slides and resource links and the recording. That being said, if you're joining without having registered, you should direct message me now with your email if you want to receive those materials. Thank you again to Shubhika and Matt, and thanks to all of you for your participation in this session. Have a great rest of your day.